It may be the number one fear over death even.
Gotta be.
Which is absolutely hilarious to me. So you would be more scared to speak at your funeral than you would be to be in the casket.
Yeah, it's a crazy thought, but like in reality, when you are the person who has to get up and you've never done it before, it is terrifying. Mouth starts drying up, hands are sweating, knees bent.
Arms are heavy. Mom's spaghetti. I don't know the rest of the song. Hey, what's up? Welcome back to the Pointman podcast. My name is Zach. I'm one of the pastors here at that church. And this is Luke,
What's up?
One of our leaders of our Pointman ministry here at that church. And we are diving into a new style of the podcast. So we took a little bit of a break if you've been following along for a while. And so what we've got going on is each month we have a monthly breakfast that we'll be kicking off August the 20th, 6:30 a.m. here at that church in Sherwood, where we'll be diving into a specific topic that the Bible lines out for men to assume, a pillar, a discipline that the Bible points for men to be focused on and to be a part of their character and their building and who they are. And so with that, the podcast is kind of an extension of that going forward. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be pulling the topic from the future month, the next month. And so leading up to it, we'll be discussing different pieces of what that topic is, and then we'll be diving into it in a 12-month, essentially series type format during these breakfasts, but also we will be bringing in special guests from the community around us, influential people, successful people, or just interesting people from the community to dive into these topics. Month one is leadership. And why do we start with leadership? Leadership is one of those tenets for men that gets overlooked a little bit. We think we don't lead anything of any substance, and so we don't really find ourselves feeling like we're leaders. In reality, that's not true. All men are leading in some capacity, in some place. Yep. And so this is a topic we need to dive into and one we need to talk about. If you're running a business and you want the best leadership podcast for your team, this is probably not it. This is for men. This is a specific group of people, and it's not about running an organization specifically. This is about running our households. It's about running organizations. It's about building teams. It's about these things that build good leaders for every man, not just the CEO or the high executive that you may be finding yourself in those roles. So today we're kicking things off. We're talking about leadership, but specifically we're talking about speaking.
Yeah, so I like the point where the breakfast is going to be in the mornings, because I feel like a lot of the times the Bible study for me is more valuable in the mornings, and I really enjoy that. So I think that's exciting. Come out to the breakfasts. They're going to be good. Drink some coffee, hang out with some dudes, and learn about some topics that men need to know about. Yeah,
there was a gym group that I heard a podcast or read about one time, and so they would start their workouts every morning at 3:50 a.m.
3:50, okay.
Because what they found was the team was exceptionally committed to waking up, because it's a weird time. It's super early. Yep. They wanted to get the work done. These are some savage dudes in the first place, but whenever time was 4:30 or if it was 5, guys would miss because it was a more normal-ish time for people to train in the morning. But when they moved it to 3:50, guys were like, I cannot be late. I have to be there. And everything about your process was like, I got to get there on time. 6:30 is not 3:50 in the morning. So you can still be committed to being there once a month, as well as make it to work on time or pretty freaking close. So, but today is speaking. Speaking is, I like to speak. Speaking is fun for me.
Yeah, and if you want to be a leader, you have to be able to communicate to your team. There's no way around it. For me, when I first started being a leader in leadership role, I was terrified to speak in front of people. That's something that you just have to kind of work at. I think it's just something that you can be better at over time. But definitely that people start speaking like, hey, you got to get up and speak. People are like, oh.
It's one of like the greatest fears. I think it may be the number one fear over death even.
Gotta be.
Which is absolutely hilarious to me. So you would be more scared to speak at your funeral than you would be to be in the casket.
Yeah, it's a crazy thought, but like in reality, when you are the person who has to get up and you've never done it before, it is terrifying. Mouth starts drying up, hands are sweating, knees bent.
Arms are heavy. Mom's spaghetti. I don't know the rest of the song.
But yeah, terrifying.
Yeah, it's and before you turn this off and you're like, I don't ever get in front of people and speak. A speaking role isn't just in front of a mass audience. A speaking role is being able to communicate information effectively to the people that are in your community and in your charge. And so in Pointman, we have 3 pillars that we build almost everything off of, and that's king, prophet, priest. All 3 of those roles have some form of information dissemination built into them, whether it's the king and you're the leader. If you're the leader in your house, you're having to do that with your family. You're giving direction, you're giving directive, you're helping those people grow as a human, but as a family and as a unit. If you're in a community group, you're disseminating information to the larger group. And if you're on a stage and you have a mass audience, your responsibility just grew in the ability to give that information or that encouragement out to. And so this is something for everybody. Like everybody has a role where they speak at some point in their life, whether that's to a mass audience, whether it's to a small group. It's there, and it's there for everybody.
Yeah, maybe you have a small family, or maybe you don't have a family at all, and you have a very small work group that you're leading, or coworkers that you're hanging out with, or a younger intern that you're mentoring at work. You have to be able to communicate to these people. So just good topics for everyday life.
Or just thinking about like on the spiritual side of this, like sharing the gospel is a communication. There is a nonverbal piece at times, but there is a verbal communication of this that we have to be able to do and to execute in some capacity. With that, I wanted to start off. We were talking just as we were setting up mics and stuff earlier about this topic and what we're talking about today. And I was thinking about when people are developing as speakers. And so there's a tendency to imitate those around you as a speaker. And what you find a lot of times, even if you're just speaking to your family, what you find a lot of times is that if you begin to imitate someone else, you lose your voice and you lose your quote unquote authority to communicate that information. They're like, that's not you, that's an act. Yep. You're doing something different. I think we have to be careful. If you are speaking to a mass audience, especially, you have to be careful to not look to all the guys that you look up to and be like, I want to be like that guy. Sure, hone your skill like they did, but you have to find your voice as well, and you have to find your style and what that looks like as you're speaking and as you're leading. Yeah,
I was thinking for me, if you look back way back when I first maybe joined the Air Force, when I first got married to JC, it's like the small things you do and whenever you're communicating, and you have to kind of build upon that. So it's like when you first do it, hey, you need to give this brief in front of these 5 people, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm terrified. But you get up and you do it one time, and you're like, well, that wasn't so bad. I got a little bit better that time. And so if you just kind of, not everybody has a chance to start small, but a lot of people do. And so that's where I would say just like get that confidence and do it once and like, hey, that wasn't so bad. I'm not so scared. A little bit more people, maybe. Next time you give another briefing, maybe it's a little bit more. I keep saying briefing. That's a military term.
That's what you do.
A talk, a talk. I do a lot of talks while I'm at work, so that's just what I go back to. But something that takes practice, and I've had to learn how to do over time. So that's been good.
So when you were learning how to do it, though, were you looking to people that you'd heard when you were in those briefs in the past for a cadence, for a style of communication?
Yeah.
Over time, though, as you've gained some confidence and comfortability in that, have you began to develop kind of your own style of delivery? And I know the military might be a little different because there's probably a relied upon cadence in some aspect, but
no, I think you're right. Like the first time I had to give a talk in front of people, I also had to do it when I was leading a group at church. I was a different church when I was active duty. I had to be a shift lead or a service lead at the Saturday service, and so I had to talk in front of about 10 or 15 people, and I just literally copied whatever I saw the last week.
Yeah.
However he did it, the other guy that I was taking it the reins from, I just did it exactly how he did it, and so it probably didn't come off as genuine, but it kind of gave me something to build on. Like you were saying, it's good. I got the tips and stuff, like the way that it should be outlined from him, maybe. But then don't do exactly how he did it, but learn from how his outline is and be able to do it myself. So.
Yeah, because I think like a lot of times we were talking about making a video earlier, and like I'm not a goofy person. Like it's unnatural for me to be goofy and like do funny stuff. It's just not my style, not my thing. But like I could see someone who is and be like, this is what they would do here, so let me try to do what they would do. But then whenever I'm in my zone, like when we're sitting here doing this, I'm 100% comfortable doing this. And I have my own, like, I don't look to a popular podcast like, oh, how do they talk? It's like, no, there's like a general, like, welcome people to the pod. But after that, this is our conversation. I'm going to communicate how I communicate. I used to joke with Pastor Eddie, who is a very, like, excited preacher when he's on stage preaching, and like he gets after it and he's like moving around and he'll get excited and he'll yell sometimes and just be, I was like, that's never gonna be me. Like in my mind, that's how I feel about the information I'm giving. But when it comes out of me, I definitely have more of like a teacher.
It's more chill
in my soul. And so like whenever I begin to talk, I don't have that, like I have to, like I literally will write on my notes sometime, like say it loud. Because I won't do it. I'll just keep going through this like cadence and energy that I've developed over time that doesn't match the need for the energy that comes out. And so I think that's it's all in that training. It's all in that development. But we can look to people for inspiration, but our way of doing it has to come from us. We have to be diligent in developing us as speakers.
Yeah, so we do have a couple of tips for people to speak better or maybe practice.
Yeah. So the first thing is put yourself in the audience.
Huge, I think. I think putting yourself in your audience is the first and foremost thing you need to do before anything. So when we're speaking here, we're putting ourselves at home, wherever you're watching this, on your phone or on your way to work. That's kind of what we're thinking about when we're making this podcast. Whenever you're talking in front of a group of people, sit of wherever they're going to sit beforehand and look in the direction that you're going to be speaking from, because that's the viewpoint that you want to get from, not only physically, but what kind of emotional state of these people. Just see something traumatic. You don't want to say something crazy. You always want to be able to put yourself in their shoes. Know that like these guys are younger guys. They don't have can't give an old person joke when these kids are like 14 years old. Yeah. Always think about whenever you're speaking to what audience you're speaking about, put yourself in their shoes, and your speech or talk or whatever you're doing is going to come off way, way better if you can think about your audience first and foremost.
Let's get two examples of this. John Maxwell, famous author and business leader, developer. Yep. He has a deal. He tries to sit in the audience of every speech. So even in those big conferences he goes to and stuff, he tries to go and to actually sit in the audience until it's time for his speech. Some people like to be in like a green room. They like to be thinking and like chilling before they walk out. It's just their process. But for him, he likes to sit out, hear the energy, feel what's going on, hear the people talking, know kind of where they're at. And then whenever he enters the stage, he's in the moment with them. Second was Andrew Schultz, a comedian. He's blown up over the last couple of years, got a great podcast. He's hilarious.
And comedians are amazing speakers.
They are.
Like
They're
in their own right. Yeah.
To look at. Yeah. For their ability to communicate their topics and content. Sometimes you got to question the morality, especially Schultz. But here's the thing. So he's blown up, and so now he's in like these massive theaters, and he's in these arenas doing these shows. And he said that what he and his team do whenever they go into, like, let's say they go into an arena that they've never been in before, they will go sit in the worst seat. So if there's a seat with like an obstructive view or the highest point in the arena or whatever it is, the furthest and hardest to see him, and then they work backwards and they try to make the best possible show for that person sitting in the worst possible seat, because then it'll flow down to the person who's in the best possible seat and they're getting the full experience at the worst possible place. When I heard that, I was like, that's such a cool thought, because a lot of times when you don't have that perspective from the audience member, when you walk out on the stage, the bigger the group, here's the odd part, the bigger the group, the easier it gets, because the faces become muddled. So when you walk out to a group of 5, those are 5 people that could call you by name standing in front of you. As that group goes to 100, it becomes a little bit easier to not be just clinched up by the fact of who you're looking at. And then as it gets to hundreds or 1,000, like, it's faces. It's just a crowd of people, and you're just kind of talking. A lot of times by that point, you're talking at a camera, you're talking at something to that's going online. So you're giving them something, but really the bulk of what you're doing, you're talking kind of above them a little bit to the back of the room. But for him, he was like, I want to know what this person's feeling by what I'm doing at the front. And so he has this perspective of the whole crowd as he works through it. Second thing, always do what... always
It's my notes, so they're a little crazy.
Sorry. What do I want them to know? What do I want them to feel? And what do I want them to do? That's very good.
Big. What do I want them to know? It's the first one, right?
Yep.
You always want to have maybe 3 talking points that you want to give to your audience, because people usually only remember 3 things, which is kind of funny. But
yeah, it's like the phone number thing. That's why they're structured the way they are, because it's easier to memorize.
Yeah, and then once you get them what you want them to know, and then you also want them to be able to feel something. A lot of times people will put stories into their talk, or just some sort of way that you want people to interact with your talk that they can have feelings about. Maybe like, I feel like that's a super big thing for the Olympics. And Olympics is going on right now. I don't know if it will be when this comes out. Probably will.
Probably will. Should be.
They always, like, just watching the Olympics, like, you see people racing, like swimming or whatever, and you're like, okay, that's cool, they won. But if you do a little, they always do it. They do like a backstory on the Olympian. They're like, they grew up in this small town. They were poor. They came from nothing. They had a tragedy in their life. They had to overcome sickness. And all of a sudden now you're like, I want this person to win more than anything in the world.
Yeah.
And so when you can kind of
connection,
exactly. So when you can kind of do that whenever you're speaking, look into your audience and be like, what have maybe they've seen in the past, or what have these people gone through that I'm talking to, that you can kind of relate to a story or some sort of something from your past that you can connect to that person with. I'm just trying to think of something off the top of my head.
But that kind of hits too. These. I mean, what do you want them to know? You want them to know this is the greatest Olympic swimmer of all time.
Yep.
What do you want them to feel? This person sacrificed everything to get here. What do you want them to do? You want them to watch. You want them to engage and to
That's their goal.
finish.
Yes, right. Yeah.
But that's a great example for every talk you give. Even if you're just in a briefing with your team at work and you're trying to, what do you want them to know? Hey, we've got this new directive. We have to do X, Y, and Z to be successful. What do you want them to feel? Excited. You want them to want to do this thing. So you give them the why. Why do we do this? Why is this so important?
Yeah.
And how do you want them to, what do you want them to do? You want them to do it. If they feel it, they know it, they can execute it. But that goes to, if you're in your house, like when I'm talking to my son, and if he's doing something he's not supposed to do, or he's really into making music, and he's getting to the point where he's wanting to try to sell some of his music to people. And so I was talking to him the other day, and he was giving me this spiel about this app that like helps distribute music. I was like, how much are you selling a song for? He was like, oh, I sold this last one for like $15. I was like, you just sold a song for $15. What if that guy makes a song on that beat and it goes viral? And now he's got $1 million. He's not giving you a dime, son. It's like, you got $15. You got $15 off of this multi-million-dollar song. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying that it could. It could in today's environment. But what I was trying to convey to him was, hey, you need to take the proper steps to distribute this thing. How do I want him to feel? In that moment, I want him to feel bad for selling a song for $15, but I also want him to feel excited for the opportunity to do it different the next time. What do I want him to know? The right process. So then after this conversation, we begin a conversation about like, hey, there's some like legal steps you'll have to take. There's some other things you could do to make sure that this doesn't go wrong for you in the future. Like I want him to know, to feel, and to execute.
Yep.
So in the next time, he's like, hey, I've got this song, got this guy who wants to buy it. All right, let's talk about what the actual next process is for that to make sure that we do the right thing. That's inside your house. It could be something as simple as taking out the trash. Like sometimes it's like, hey, do it. But like sometimes you got to explain, especially as they get a little older and they can start understanding things. You're like, I need to have them feel a certain way.
Yeah. Hey, I need you to take out the trash. Well, I don't care. It's going to stink in here and it's going to be smelly. People are coming over and they're going to think we're stinky, nasty people. And they're like, why don't people think I'm stinky, nasty people? Because people are coming over. So take out the trash.
You're right. And that's a super simplistic version of it, but it is an example of something that we do deal with like on a daily basis, not just on a mass communication type situation. Final thing is walk out on stage, show your hands, touch your heart, and give a big smile. You got these from somebody, didn't you?
Greg.
I was going to say, that's a very like speaker focused.
Yep. For some reason, hands are a very big part of whenever you're speaking. We probably don't do the best about it on this podcast, but like whenever I heard this during one of Craig's talks, but he said like when people have their hands like tucked away like this, it gives them the look of like they're hiding something. And like when you're talking about like the criminal aspect of the world, like if you're a criminal, you're always like you have something in your hand, you could pull out anything. a knife, a gun, whatever. So when people are always like, hey, how are you doing? That gives a sign like these people aren't a threat to me. And so it kind of convinces the person in your audience when you have your hands like this pointed out or showing or whatever together, they're not a threat. So that kind of eases people's tension. So just kind of be aware of those little things like that too when you're giving a talk.
I'm a hand talker.
Don't be putting your hands in your pocket or behind your back or whatever.
I'm a bad hand talker. I will like set my hand in like a pocket, especially if I'm speaking. I have like a jacket on. I'll end up sliding the hand in there at some point. But I'm such a bad hand talker that I've done messages like on video before, and I've like knocked the mics out of the way and like knocked stuff off of tables next to me. Because if I'm on stage, like my hands are usually like bouncing and moving. I get in trouble by our Pointman tech team all the time because I'll like have it down. A microphone will end up like at my waist at some point because I'm like trying to make a point and no one can hear me because I'm like, that's a whole other topic, but about microphone like etiquette. But it is something that it's good because one, it's engaging. It brings people into like what you're doing. Like you can use your hands to like drive some of that feeling and some of that intensity at times when you need it from people. Touch your heart. I'm never going to do that. But I get it. And give a huge, big smile. Yeah. You want them to know that while you're there. Yeah. It's a good one. That's not always, I think, true. Sometimes a scowl is the right thing. Like if you need to give somebody some bad news, maybe not smile at them.
Yeah, depending on what you're talking about, you might be like, hey, you're talking to your kids, you're disciplined. You might not you're not going to smile.
Yeah. No, you're going to be like, all right.
Put your hands in your pockets.
Essentially, what we're talking about is setting the tone for the communication that's coming.
100%.
What do you want it to feel? You have to show that yourself. What do you want them to know? You have to give the right context for that. You can't walk out on... when we host on Sundays here, sometimes there will be like a song that's very like emotional and moving that ends our worship time. You don't want the host to walk out and be like, "Hey, everybody, what's going on?
Yeah.
Woo!" Like that's gonna just
got to build into it.
Yeah, it's gonna turn everything. So you have to kind of know and feel what's going on in the room, and then begin speaking or conversing at that right time with the right emotion, and then you can develop and turn it into where it needs to get to eventually. And that's something that you have to work on and develop. I want a couple of verses to kind of back some of this stuff up real quick. Proverbs 16:23, the heart of the wise makes his speech judicious and adds persuasiveness to his lips. Speak with wisdom, speak with understanding.
Yeah, so what I was going to talk about, this verse was a good verse, is always do your research before you give any kind of talk. It makes whatever talk or think about, not prepare, but you can think about it, plan it, maybe even do it a couple times, depending on what the situation is. You're giving a small brief, giving a small talk to a couple of people. Do it once before they're in the audience, before they come in. You need to have a hard conversation with a coworker or a person that you're working with. Have the conversation in your head and think about the topic points that you're going to talk about before you get there. I think doing your research before any kind of talk or any kind of message that you give, it's going to go 1,000 times better, especially if you practice it a bunch of times. It's going to go a lot better. Even if you only practice it once, it's going to be better than just winging it off the cuff because you're like, man, I shouldn't have said that in the moment. If you had thought about it just once beforehand, and you wouldn't have said the thing you didn't want to say. So preparing is the best way to do it.
And that depends on who you are and the stage of communicating that you're at. Some people script everything. Some people have like highlight points that they take with them or that they study.
But those highlight points you've thought about beforehand.
And you know where they're going and how they're leading places. Exactly. Teach and instruct. 2 Timothy 2:24-25, and the Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but kind to everyone, able to teach, patiently enduring evil, correcting his opponents with gentleness. So when you are teaching, when you are instructing, do it with gentleness, do it with kindness, do it with love when you're communicating those hard topics and hard things to people, but communicate them. It's not a pass to not communicate with those people, the things they need to know. But there is a spirit in which you have to do it.
Yeah, so I would think every time I give a talk or anytime I speak to anyone, I'll always try to go through the lens of treat others how you want to be treated. That is, if you look through that lens every time you're speaking with someone, like, what, I want them to be this harsh with me? And you're like, maybe I do. Maybe I'm messing up. I want them to be this harsh with me. Or maybe like, hey, I need to be a little gentle. How would I want them to say this to me if I'm in the other foot? If I'm in this person's audience, they're speaking to me, how would I want them to say it to me? And that's always how I try to talk to people, because I never want to be sitting in the audience and like, I wouldn't say this to myself. Like, that's not the right this is not, read the room, like we shouldn't be saying that right now. Like look out in the audience beforehand. So that's what I was going to say is always look through the lens of treat others how you want to be treated, the golden rule. That's how.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And, when you're talking about doing that with gentleness and with respect and, I don't know, I lost my thought. Never mind. We're moving on.
Yep.
Encourage and build up. Therefore, 1 Thessalonians 5:11, therefore encourage one another and build one another up just as you are doing. The role of a leader is to lead someone to a final position place. So when you're correcting, whenever you're developing, you're always teaching and you're always growing. And that does take gentleness, that does take patience, and it does cause us to have to stop and to evaluate what we're doing and to move people forward.
Yeah. Building others up is probably might be 50% of what you're doing as a leader. You want to be able to have people take your role, or maybe you need to convey something that you need to get out to your people that you're working with, to that they need to do something, or trying to build them up as a mentor. I think a lot of times speaking is a great way to it's the only way to mentor real people, really, is communicating with that person. But that's one of the main goals of whenever you're speaking in your life, is to try to mentor people. And if you're not good at that, then you're not going to be able to be good at mentor, building people up to take your place or be better whatever they're going to do in their future, whatever thing that they're handling in their future.
Yeah, or to just move your family forward, or to move your business forward, or to move your church forward, or to move your community group forward. Yeah, that's good. Yep. Final thoughts, leadership speaking? It's
tough. It's not an easy thing to do. When I first started speaking, I don't know, it's horrible, terrifying, but practice it. Have the courage to do it. If someone asks you to speak and you're like, I'm not doing it, maybe give a second thought. Try to speak as best you can and do your research beforehand. Go over these tips, write them down, and use them in your speech. Because if you can do those things that we said, like we just said it off the cuff, like, oh, just do these. They're tough. They're not easy to do. You got to do your research. You have to practice it. You have to put them into action. Every speaker in the world tries to do these things. Doesn't always land and doesn't always go over well. So it takes practice. You got to try your best.
Yeah, preparation. Yeah. You can tell when someone doesn't prepare.
100%.
It's pretty obvious whenever you're looking at that. Overcoming the fear of speaking, even if it's just to your kids or your family or whatever. Say hey. Just the first thing is the hardest thing to say. Once you get going, you can generally get rocking. Even the person who's the most scared of speaking, it's getting those first words out. Have a canned open that you always do if it's something that you're uncomfortable doing. But usually once you can get the, hey, welcome out, you can kind of rock and roll. So get the first words out. If you do catch a pause, if you're like losing your train of thought, know this. If you're on stage somewhere, the pause is so much longer in your head than it is in the ears of the people in the audience. They don't really even notice it. Just pause. Don't fill it with crap. Don't fill it with things. That's a lot of people will get scared and just start talking. Don't do that. Just pause, get your thoughts, and then keep going. No one's going to care. Again, that's not the point. The point is to teach, instill, and to emphasize and move someone to do something. So don't freak out and just start rambling, because it's not going to help you in the long run. And don't be scared to do it. You can't develop as a speaker, even if it's just to your kids, without talking, without doing it. There is no substitute for doing the real thing. So make sure you're just communicating, giving it a shot. You make it happen. Shout out Craig Rochelle. These 3 leadership speaking that we kind of broke down and talked about are great. I think they're perfect. Why not? Because he's a great communicator and leader. And so shout out to him for those 3.
I agree.
All right. We'll see you next time.
See you.